What if everything you thought you knew about human history was incomplete? What if, beneath the waves of the Atlantic Ocean, or perhaps hidden in the sands of the Sahara, or buried under volcanic ash in the Mediterranean, lies the remnants of a civilization so advanced, so powerful, that its very memory was erased from the timeline of humanity? This is the story of Atlantis. For over 2,400 years, this single word has captivated the imagination of philosophers, explorers, scientists, and dreamers alike. It has launched countless expeditions. It has fueled billion-dollar industries. It has inspired works of art, literature, and film that span every culture on Earth. But here is the question that haunts us still. Was Atlantis merely a myth, a fictional tale invented by a philosopher to make a point? Was it propaganda, a carefully constructed lie designed to serve political purposes? Or was it something far more remarkable, a historical memory, a fragmented echo of a real civilization that vanished so completely that only whispers remained? In the next 35 minutes, we are going to journey through time itself. We will examine the original texts. We will analyze the evidence. We will explore the theories that range from the academic to the extraordinary. And by the end, you will understand why Atlantis refuses to die, and why the truth might be more incredible than any fiction. This is not just a story about a lost city. This is a story about what we have forgotten, and what we might be on the verge of remembering. To understand Atlantis, we must begin at the beginning, not in some ancient underwater ruin, but in a very specific place, the mind of one of history's greatest philosophers, Athens, approximately 360 years before the Common Era. Plato, student of Socrates, teacher of Aristotle, and architect of Western philosophy, sat down to write a series of dialogues. Among them were two works that would echo through millennia: the Timaeus and the Critias. It is here, and only here, that the story of Atlantis originates. There are no earlier sources. No Egyptian hieroglyphics independently confirm it. No Sumerian tablets describe it. Every single reference to Atlantis in human history traces back to these two dialogues written by one man. This fact alone should give us pause. But what Plato wrote has never ceased to mesmerize. In the dialogues, the story is presented not as Plato's own invention, but as a tale passed down through generations. The character of Critias explains that the story was told to the Athenian statesman Solon by Egyptian priests at the Temple of Neith-in-Sais during Solon's travels to Egypt around 590 BCE. The priests, according to this account, possessed records of events that the Greeks had long forgotten. They spoke of a time when the world was different, when great civilizations rose and fell, and when catastrophes erased their memory from the minds of humanity. And they spoke of Atlantis. 9,000 years before the time of Solon, they said, there existed an island larger than Libya and Asia combined. This island lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we today call the Strait of Gibraltar, in the Atlantic Ocean. Upon this island rose a civilization unlike any other. The Atlantis that Plato described was not merely a city. It was a marvel of engineering, architecture, and natural abundance that seems almost impossible even by modern standards. The island was ruled by Poseidon, god of the sea, who fell in love with a mortal woman named Cleito. To protect her, he carved the land into a series of concentric rings, alternating rings of water and land, creating a fortress that seemed impenetrable. At the center of this configuration stood a temple to Poseidon himself, covered entirely in silver with pinnacles of gold. The temple housed a massive golden statue of the god driving a chariot pulled by 6-winged horses, surrounded by 100 nereids riding dolphins. The Atlanteans were master engineers. They carved tunnels through the rings of land, creating passages large enough for ships to sail from the outer ocean directly to the inner citadel. They built bridges and covered canals. They constructed harbors filled with vessels from nations across the known world. The island was rich beyond imagination. It possessed forests of exotic trees, herds of elephants, and deposits of a mysterious metal called orichalcum, second in value only to gold, which covered the walls of the citadel and flashed like fire in the sunlight. The Atlanteans built hot and cold fountains, elaborate bathhouses, and training facilities for their warriors. They created a vast rectangular plain, irrigated by an intricate network of canals that produced 2 harvests per year. Their military was staggering in scale. Plato describes an army of over 1 million soldiers, 1,200 ships, and 10,000 chariots. But it was not just their material wealth that made Atlantis remarkable. In the beginning, the Atlanteans were virtuous. They possessed a divine nature. They valued wisdom over wealth, and they lived in harmony with divine law, until they didn't. What happened to Atlantis is, perhaps, the most haunting part of Plato's account. As generations passed, the divine portion of the Atlanteans' nature began to fade. The blood of the gods became diluted through intermarriage with mortals, and with it, their virtue diminished. They became corrupted by greed. They grew arrogant with power. They lusted for conquest. The Atlanteans, no longer content with their island paradise, launched a military campaign to conquer the Mediterranean world. Their armies swept through Libya up to the borders of Egypt and through Europe to the borders of Tyrrhenia. It seemed as if nothing could stop them. Nothing, that is, except Athens. In Plato's telling, it was the ancient Athenians, ancestors of those living in his own time, who stood against the Atlantean onslaught. Even when their allies deserted them, the Athenians fought alone. And remarkably, impossibly, they prevailed. They defeated the greatest military power the world had ever seen and liberated all the peoples who had been enslaved. But then something cataclysmic occurred. There occurred violent earthquakes and floods, Plato writes. And in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea. In one terrible moment, the mighty civilization was gone. The warriors, the temples, the harbors, the elephants, the orichalcum-covered walls, all of it swallowed by the ocean, leaving behind only impassable mud shoals that made the Atlantic Ocean unnavigable for generations. And humanity forgot. The Greeks forgot their own ancient glory. The Egyptians alone preserved the memory in their temples. And when Solon heard the tale, it was already ancient beyond comprehension. A story from the edge of time itself. Now that we understand what Plato actually wrote, we must confront the first and most academically accepted explanation for Atlantis. It was fiction, a myth, a philosophical allegory invented entirely by Plato to serve his own purposes. This is the position held by the overwhelming majority of classical scholars, and their arguments are substantial. First, there is the source problem. Plato is the only ancient writer to mention Atlantis. His own student, Aristotle, reportedly dismissed it as invention. If such a mighty civilization had truly existed, would not other ancient historians have mentioned it independently? Second, there is the question of Plato's method. He was famous for using myths and allegories to illustrate philosophical points. Creating fictional scenarios to explore ideas about justice, virtue, and political organization was his signature approach. And Atlantis fits perfectly into his larger philosophical project. Consider this. In the dialogue, the virtuous ancient Athens defeats the corrupt and imperialistic Atlantis. The story is a morality tale. It warns against hubris, against the corruption that power brings, against the abandonment of divine law in favor of human greed. Moreover, the specific details of Atlantis mirror almost exactly the hypothetical cities Plato designed in his other works. It's as if he took his philosophical blueprints and dramatized them. But even those who accept the myth theory acknowledge something remarkable. Plato created what might be the world's first science fiction story, a fully realized, technologically advanced civilization. And somehow, this fiction refused to remain fiction. But what if Atlantis was not merely philosophical allegory? What if it was something more calculated, a piece of political propaganda? Consider the historical context. Plato wrote, during a period of profound crisis for Athens, the city had been humiliated in the Peloponnesian War. Its democratic experiment had produced the chaos that led to the execution of Socrates. The old certainties of Athenian greatness seem to be crumbling. Into this context, Plato introduces a story in which Athens was once the greatest city on earth, so great that it single-handedly defeated the most powerful empire ever known. This is nationalistic myth-making of the highest order. Atlantis, in this reading, serves as a double propaganda function. It provides a warning about the fate that awaits any civilization, including Athens's rivals, that allows power to corrupt virtue. If Atlantis was propaganda, it was extraordinarily successful propaganda. It has shaped how civilizations view themselves for over 2 millennia. Every time a society fears it has become too decadent, Atlantis lurks in the cultural memory as a warning. And yet, something about the Atlantis account refuses to fit neatly into the categories of pure myth or propaganda. What if Plato was not entirely inventing? What if, buried within his philosophical allegory, there exists a kernel of historical truth? A memory of a real event distorted through millennia of oral transmission. The most compelling version of this theory focuses on one of the most dramatic natural disasters in Mediterranean history, the eruption of Thera, approximately 3,600 years ago. The volcanic island of Thera experienced one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history. It generated tsunamis over 100 feet high that devastated coastlines across the eastern Mediterranean. And just 50 miles to the south of Thera lay the island of Crete, home to the Minoan civilization. The Minoans were, by the standards of their time, astonishing. They built the first advanced civilization in Europe. Their palace at Knossos was a labyrinth of over 1,000 interconnected rooms. Their art depicted a vibrant culture. Their trade networks extended throughout the Mediterranean. Their navy was legendary, and they vanished. The Theron eruption did not immediately destroy the Minoans, but it dealt them a devastating blow. Tsunamis destroyed their coastal cities. Volcanic ash poisoned their farmland. Within a few generations, Minoan civilization was gone, eventually forgotten entirely, until archaeologists rediscovered Knossos in the early 20th century. Now consider the parallels. A powerful island civilization with advanced technology. A maritime empire of great wealth. A catastrophic destruction in a single period of disaster. A forgetting so complete that only fragmentary memories remained. Is it possible that the Atlantis story is, at its core, a garbled memory of the fall of the Minoans? The theory has problems, but myths rarely preserve events accurately. They distort, exaggerate, relocate, and mythologize. Perhaps what the Egyptian priests told Solon, if they told him anything, was a genuine historical memory that Solon and later Plato reshaped according to their own understanding and purposes. We arrive at last at the end of our journey, but not at the end of the mystery. We have traveled from the philosophical heights of ancient Athens to the speculative frontiers of deep archaeology. We are left standing before the same question. Was Atlantis a myth, a piece of propaganda, or a genuine historical memory? The honest answer is that it remains an enigma. Instead, the legend of Atlantis exists in the fascinating space where all three interpretations overlap and inform one another, creating a mystery far richer than any simple solution. We are drawn to the story of Atlantis because it speaks to our deepest hopes, our most persistent fears. It is a mirror reflecting our own anxieties about our civilization, our past, and our future. It challenges our modern assumption of perpetual progress, suggesting that history is not a straight line upwards, but a cyclical saga of rising and falling worlds. Atlantis endures as a symbol of the unknown. It reminds us that, for all our science and technology, the past remains a vast, uncharted territory. The story persists because it is a vessel for our dreams of a better, wiser past, and a cautionary tale for our precarious present. A puzzle with missing pieces, an echo from a time we can't quite remember, and a destination we will never stop seeking. Voice shifts to be more direct and powerful. This is Cluster Story. If you were captivated by this journey into the heart of history's greatest mystery, please subscribe to our channel. Like this video to help us uncover more stories, and share it with anyone who dares to ask, what might lie hidden in our forgotten past?